Well, a quick introduction to myself and David. My name's Adrian Farthing. I've been working with DaXtra for about a year and a half now. I started working in recruitment technology back in the late 90s for a well-known CRM company. But again, really my entire working history, I've been working with recruitment companies and in-house recruiters, both small and enterprise global recruiters as well, and really helping them to maximize the most out of their recruitment tech. David.
Hi there. Yeah, cheers, Adrian. My name's David Mercer. Really excited to kick off the second part of our three-part series of webinars today. I've been working with DaXtra in the rec tech space for approaching 5 years now. Looking forward to sharing our thoughts with you today. In the latter part of this session, just like with the first part, I'll be taking you through a short presentation / demo of our solutions and comparing these against a traditional Boolean search, which is the topic for today's webinar. As Adrian mentioned, there was a few questions from last week we didn't get a chance to answer. So hopefully these will be answered in the actual demonstration today. But if there's anything else you want to ask, please pop to the Q&A session. And if we have time today, we'll jump on those as well. But I'll hand back now to Aid to take you through the first part of this session.
Great, thanks, Dave. Okay, well, quick headline. The webinar series is about adding value for businesses under financial strain. If you think about the recruitment industry, you know, it's a very difficult time, and in fact, no industry, company or individual is exempt from that. You know, certainly you know, 2 weeks ago was our last webinar. So much has happened since then. I think we're in week 11 of essential lockdown. But again, some good news, some restrictions beginning to ease, some good news about schools, and perhaps even better news about the high street opening and to some level, and you know, football is on its way back, it seems. So you know, things aren't too bad. But of course, you know, some very concerning news, certainly with Rolls-Royce being the most notable, 9,000 job losses there. So really, if you're a recruiter, then you know there's or an owner of a recruitment business, you know, looking at your recruitment technology is a key thing to do now. And you know, where I'm thinking about how you're going to effectively source candidates in the future, and that's where DaXtra can help you. Certainly automate some of the key tasks, do things with less people. So that's why we bring the webinar series today. And one of the key subjects is, you know, one, how does DaXtra differ from a CRM search? Why we believe Boolean searches belong in the past, and identifying the best candidates first. So part 2 is today, why Boolean searches belong in the past. Part 1 is on our blog. If you didn't get a chance to attend, really would recommend listening to it. It's very short, 30 minutes long, and we're really talking about how we differ from a traditional CRM searches, and you know how DaXtra interface, you know, fits in with them, and some of the challenges we solve there as well. If you haven't heard of DaXtra, very high level overview. We automate the process of many processes with recruitment technology, but essentially our software is built with natural language, machine learning, and automation, so AI. And we're parsing over 100 million CVs every month. So we're learning a lot about candidates and how they represent themselves or talk about themselves within their CV. Our machine learning is learning from that constantly, and we're able to plug that learning into our search and match platform, DaXtra Search, which we'll talk about today, to help recruiters be really quick at sourcing candidates, whether they exist in the database or on the job boards or social platforms as well. So part 2, why Boolean searches belong in the past. So listen, if you're sourcing in a recruitment team today, you're probably using your CRM to the best effect. These are some of the CRMs that we partner with and we integrate with. They're all great CRMs. I recommend you use them or check them out. Of course, these are cloud platforms. And you know, when I started working in recruitment technology back in the late 90s, I started on the help desk at Adapt. And one of the key or the most common calls I get would be about search. How do I use search effectively? The search has stopped working. How can you fix it? How can you configure the search to work for my recruitment team? So, and of course, one of the key things is Boolean. Training recruiters how to use Boolean, and that in itself can be a challenge. And but let's think about where Boolean does work for a minute, and perhaps where it doesn't work. Very, very high level. So perhaps where it does work for you or for me, certainly on the left-hand side, is when working with experienced recruiters in their industry. They know their candidates, they know the database, they consider themselves very experienced at Boolean. Of course, with Boolean, you can build quite complex searches, ands, ors, and nots. And even so, there might be tools within the database that you have where you can save your favorite Boolean searches and easily load them into your search. Or perhaps, if that doesn't exist within the database, you have to invest in tools to do that for you. Or perhaps you also use Boolean to search over external sources, external job boards, as well as social platforms as well. Can be really good, but of course, there's lots of different ways that you can build a Boolean search, and we'll cover some of examples later on. Dave's going to talk you through some examples there. But when Boolean doesn't work for me, look, it doesn't matter how experienced you are, it can be easy to make mistakes, maybe put the brackets in the wrong way. You might not configure the ands and all. Look, there are mistakes you can make. The other challenge when Boolean doesn't work is when you've got a team of recruiters that don't really believe in the database, so don't believe that all the candidates are getting in the database or categorized in the right way. Certainly the challenges we overcome now with DaXtra, used to be overcome with coding of the database, and that no one codes. I mean, if you wanted to really think about or listen to our views on coding and how we differ, go and please listen to part 1 of the webinar. We cover that in extent. And again, we have tools as part of DaXtra to automate that process for you. But that again is a subject for another day. That's more about our CV parsing and automation tools. But back to Boolean, when Boolean doesn't work, again, if you get unsuitable candidates returned, even if you've got a great search and you're seeing candidates that don't match their experience or the skills and the job titles you're looking for are in a candidate's work history of 10 years ago, and then he's at the top of the search, again, recruiters are going to really not look at the database, and potentially also the performance of the database as well. Is it scaled for your business? Are there problems with indexing in there? Are your recruiters trained to use it to its best capabilities? And recruiters like to search in lots of different ways as well to overcome some of these challenges as well. Look, if it's too complicated, it takes too long, the recruiters are just going to turn off, and they're going to start sourcing candidates elsewhere. So these are the kind of overview of the challenges. Now, if we're going to drill down that or into 3 key points, it really comes down to recruiters building a search query, the performance of the database searching, and some of the limitations with search. So building a search query, look, recruiters are not hackers. They may not have studied computer science or really interesting George Bull. Gen Z recruiters, that we're all used to using our phones. We're used to using Siri or Alexa to ask questions. We're not expected to build complex codes. We're used to using Google and getting instant results that are relevant. Look, building a search query is complicated. We all know that. It's a very easy statement to make. But if you are working with more junior recruiters, you're going to have to invest in training. You're going to have to invest in training how to use the local search, or invest in technology, either move to a better CRM or invest in tools in the market to build those Boolean strings for you. But look, investing in those tools isn't always going to fix the problem. It's not going to, yeah, it may be a band-aid to get to better search results. But the problem is, if the search performance of the local CRM isn't working for the recruiters, doesn't matter how well the best Boolean search in the world is not going to get you results in the way that you need to get them efficiently and effectively. And again, some of the performance issues there, I mean, maybe that you can't easily configure the search in the systems you're using. Maybe you want to use a combination of Boolean and some coded fields potentially. It could be that potential issues with the document indexing. So if I give you an example, if you're searching for location, are you going to search for location or the town that's in the database, or the town that's in the CV? It certainly can throw up different errors that there for you. Potential issues with document indexing. Look, working on the help desk, I know this exists. I've worked with my customers before, both from the account management perspective and always asking questions about how the searching works. But it's, again, if the indexing is not quite working for you, and what I mean by indexing is that the CRMs, every new CV that comes into the database should be picked up and put in an area where you can search over. So when you're building your search and running your search, it's searching over this document index. But it can be that the index comes out of date. It may be that candidates are not getting in there and those indexes aren't building. But it relies on someone who's going to spot that in your business. Do you have someone that's looking after the CRM? Are they checking the logs? All the CRM companies I mentioned, they have great support teams. They're really good at picking these up. So again, issues with document indexing can again turn the candidates off your recruiters off the local database. And again, if it takes too long to identify the best candidates, we'll cover some of these things about in the Dave's demo about context. Generally, where do these terms appear on the CV? Are they appearing in the job title? Are they appearing in the work history? So we think about the limitations here underneath. Lastly, when you're building a Boolean search, you need to know all the key term expansions, so all the different ways in which the candidates can write about themselves, or the synonyms of those skills. It's not easy with Boolean to easily pinpoint where the term is expressed. Yeah, as I mentioned, are you searching for the term in a job title, the skills and the work history, the education or the qualification or the company? How were you able to pinpoint some of these things? And certainly, lastly, with Boolean, it's not easy to find the years of experience or the proficiency of the terms you're looking for. So how many years has someone worked for a company? How many years have they had experience working, with say JavaScript or oncology or whatever you're searching for, and across how many years of experience across the work history. So these are some of the challenges that we've spent over 18 years working out with CVs, and Dave's going to really look at those specific examples and how DaXtra helps solve them. Over to you, Dave.
Cool. Yeah. Cheers. Thanks, Adrian. So I'm going to take you through a very quick demonstration of how we search our solutions. And as I'm going through it, if they've got any questions or you want to challenge anything I'm doing, you think I'm doing anything wrong, please feel free to throw it in the questions and answer. And if we get a chance, we'll come back and address those. Now, last week, we took you through an overview of our natural language searching and our matching and how you can build a matching query off the back of a vacancy. Well, this week, I want to take a deeper dive into our natural language searching and compare that against a traditional Boolean query and identify where we see the advantages of using that. Now, and perhaps in slight contrast to what Adrian's just said, our platforms do still support full Boolean searching. And that's because we don't want to dictate how a consultant should run their searches. We just want to be able to provide all the tools so they can make their best judgment depending on the job, depending on the industry, depending on the consultant, on which method is best. Is it better to use our natural language searching? Better to create a match query? Better to use Boolean? Again, we leave that decision with the recruiter. But as Aid was sort of alluding to there, what really makes the difference comes down to our indexing of the information. When we take all these CVs, these candidate data, and put them in our index to make them searchable, we're effectively reading them like a human would and qualifying what the terms mean across the CV, not just what they actually say, not just what the words are saying on the page, but what they mean within context. And then that helps you construct a search to then bring back the relevant candidates. In part 3 of the series, we're going to take a look at our ranking as well, and how we sort all those best candidates in rank order. But today we're going to take a look at building a query and comparing that against a Boolean term as well. So what I've got here is I've got a generic sort of job description, and I'm going to put myself in the place of a recruiter. So I've received this job spec, and I now need to go out and find candidates that meet the criteria of this job description. So I've had a quick read through, and I've highlighted a few key areas that I'm going to be searching over. I'm going to look for people with the job title of project manager. It says as a requirement of 5 years experience with Agile. Again, this could be any industry, any skill, any job title, just using project manager as an example. A nice to have Scrum methodology, and experience with financial organizations in the past. So that's the job spec I'm going to use. So what I've done is, now feel free, I'm not a Boolean black belt, as Adrian mentioned earlier, but this is my interpretation of how you might construct a Boolean query. Feel free to pour scorn all over this if you'd like to, but this is my interpretation of that. So I've got my job title of project manager, and I've had to know all the other variations of how this can be written. So I've got project manager, project director, project officer. You can also see in here spelling mistakes deliberately. Project manager, I'm sure you've all seen that hundreds of times in your database when they don't write manager correctly. Or project MGR, again, abbreviation of that. I then brought in my skills. And I've also brought in Capital One as an example of a financial institute. And also, and I'll explain this a bit further, I've also brought in the term Microsoft because I've managed to place really good project managers before that have also worked for Microsoft. So I brought that in as an OR. Now, where I see some challenges, potential challenges here, is one, it can be quite easy to make a mistake. And this is a relatively simple Boolean query. I brought in a few extras for a clinical research associate or even a real estate query. And again, these are still relatively simple. You can see them getting far longer and longer. But as Adrian mentioned, sort of in the final 3 bullet points on the previous slides, I now need to know my subject matter inside out. Some of you will, which is great. A lot of perhaps graduate recruiters or people that have changed fields recently, especially in light of the current situation, may not know all the terms that are relevant and all the expansions and all the other ways that can be written across a CV. You also need to stay up to date with that, because in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, 2 years' time, these terms may have changed. There may be additional ways of writing these things into CVs. Even if I do stay up to date, and I do type these all in perfectly, every comma, every speech mark, every bracket is entered in correctly, the search engine doesn't always know what these words mean. So Microsoft is a perfect example, and I'm going to take you through that just now. I'm looking for someone that's worked for Microsoft, but my query doesn't know if they've used Microsoft Excel, or they've worked for Microsoft, or they've got a qualification and they're Microsoft certified. For example, it has no way of understanding the context within that term has been found. And finally, I needed to have 5 years experience with agile methodologies. And again, I'm just looking for the word. It doesn't say how much experience, doesn't set their proficiency of what they need to have to return those results. So I'm going to take you through 3 techniques that we use as part of our natural language searching. And that's AI term expansion. We touched on that briefly in the previous session, just to recap that again. Term categorization and term proficiency. And at the end, we're going to come in and fill in those advantages of what I see bring to your search before we wrap up. So let's take you through those 3. And then at the end of those 3, I'll run it all together to show you the results. So if we start with term expansion, we've got our search interface here. So I'm going to type in the job title, which was project manager. We'll come back to these categorizations later. But I've selected project manager, one term, and you can already see, if I drag my cursor over there, you can already see the automatic expansions, the other ways that we've seen based on our localized machine learning over the database, the corpus of data you have, and backed up by our global machine learning, all these hundreds of millions of CVs that we process. How else have we seen project manager written down? So already it's learned, so you can see in the project manager example, project MGR, project director, you can actually see just crossed out at the bottom, there's actually 30 more. So I've got at least 40, I'd say, expansions there, 40 or so expansions, just by typing in one term. And of course, the more terms I add in, the more expansions that I have. You can see easily with a 5-term query, you could have easily within that over 100 terms. And that would be quite lengthy to type out and avoid making mistakes on. The second part of that was for term categorization. So in this example, I'm going to use Microsoft. I'm going to use the company name. And again, this applies to not just companies, it applies to industries and qualifications and skills. But I've typed in Microsoft. I'm actually going to use a Boolean query here. So I did say our platform can support Boolean. So I've entered in Microsoft with no context at all, just the term. Run my search over the local data. And I'm going to return back 1,000 results. So 1,000 candidates have met the criteria of Microsoft. Again, I'm breaking it down slowly. We'll bring it all back together later. But you can see here, just from a summary of this candidate, it's highlighted where it's found the term, and it appears to be under their skills. So you can see in here Microsoft SQL, Microsoft Office, Microsoft Visio, for example. Lots of different ways where Microsoft's been represented, but that's not the search I'm looking for. We can actually see his recent employments I'm highlighting here, and none of them are mentioning Microsoft. So if I come back now and type that in again, but this time use our natural language term categorization, I'll enter in Microsoft, and it's now telling me again on how we've indexed this data. So we've read over your corpus of data and looking at your candidates and saying, well, where have they represented Microsoft as a skill? And again, you can see here, we've seen X number of people have referenced Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Outlook or other terms that aren't company names. Where has it been represented as a qualification? Again, we're reading the words around it, looking at how they're talking about it. Easy for a human to do when you read a CV to know that's someone's company name or where they've or what they've studied, for example. But again, we were able to read that with the technology. And finally, Microsoft, again, as a company name. Where does it appear as a company? You can actually set when they worked there. So I'm going to set people that have worked for Microsoft within the last 5 years, bring me back those results. You can see we've gone from 1,000 down to 4 candidates over the same set of data. But now, as you see where I'm highlighting, it's actually previous employment. They may well have the skill Microsoft Office as well, but that's not what we're searching on. We're searching on when they've worked there and the company itself. Okay. And then the final of those 3 parts is term proficiency. So now I'm going to look at the skills, and I'm going to use Agile. That was one of the skills on my job description. I'm going to select Agile as a skill, categorizing it. And then when I hover over this, I can actually set this, their proficiency. So at least working, basic, excellent, or actually the years of experience. So I could set that to 5 years, between 5 to 7 years, bring it in with all the expansions, all the ORs effectively, and then run my search. But it's not just for Agile and other skills like that. Could use it for language skills. Again, it depends on the term you enter. So I could say how experienced, how prolific are they with French language. I want an excellent native speaker, and then I can run my search. So it's just making sure your results are really precise. You're not going to get back 1,000 candidates and then actually the 72nd candidate is the right one for you. It's making sure those best ones are going to be at the top or highest up in the list, the most relevant ones. Sorry. So to bring that all together, I'm going to, as if I've just started from my job description, rather than entering that Boolean query that I did at the start of project manager, the expansions, etc. I've got my job description. Now let's create a search. So I type in project manager, make sure it's a job title I'm looking for. Great. Actually, one of the questions that was asked last week by a Mr. S. Stamp, I believe the username was what if you wanted to make this an OR query as well, if to use Boolean terms. So you wanted to look for a project manager or a program manager or a product manager, I think was the exact example. And you can do that here with our interface. So effectively, anything you type in left to right would be an AND query, and anything vertically would be your OR query. So I can do project manager or senior product manager is going to be my query, just to show you that. Again, agile methodology. The job description said they needed at least 5 years experience. Perfect, pop that in. And then it was financial expertise or work for a financial institute before. So I'm going to bring in, like from my Boolean query, financial company, Capital One. Now you could put in HSBC, Goldman Sachs, whatever you want here, just to give you an example. But they must have worked for them. It's not that Capital One back to their credit card. It's actually that they've worked there. Bring in some job boards. Again, just ticked 2 randomly here. We support over 200 different job boards. And you can see now, I'm getting my results back. So from the local database, I found that one candidate, depending on the size of the database, depends on how many that come back. But you can see in their employment history, project manager at Capital One. Recently, agile methodologies has been referenced as a skill within their description. And again, yeah, from one of our external sources as well, senior project manager at Capital One. So we're not going to jump any further than that. We are going to save the ranking on why we brought back the candidates in the rank order for next week. But just to wrap that section up, just fill in the gaps of the advantages. So these are the 3 techniques that we went through that we believe can get you to the better talent faster than Boolean can. So AI term expansion will find the relevant candidates no matter how they've used the words, how they describe their expertise on the CVs. We then categorize the terms to make sure we're finding what the candidate actually means by that, not just what the word has said on the CV, but actually what is the context behind that? Is it your job title or is it the company name or the skill, for example? And then term proficiency, making sure it's really, really precise results. You're actually bringing back the results that meet the criteria of the search, not bringing back hundreds of thousands of candidates and then having to refine it down. You're actually getting to those best candidates straight away. So I'll hand back over to Aid now. Please keep the questions coming in. I've seen a couple, so I'll jump onto those shortly. But Aid, back over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Great demo. Yeah, thanks everyone. Hopefully this is informative. If any of the challenges resonate with you, please get in touch. Certainly the benefit, as Dave said, it's about capturing every single candidate, being able to search them to make sure those candidates aren't slipping through the cracks. But essentially, if you think about when we were talking about the current market, enabling your teams to be agile in the way they source candidates and be really effective and fast, and start to maximize your current assets, maximize the database, help your recruiters actually search over the job boards more efficiently and more effectively. Are the way that we build our Boolean queries is very, very effective. We've learned that over all the millions of CVs we see every single month. And certainly if you're looking to do things do more with less people, DaXtra should really be, or if it's not already, and if you're not already thinking about this, thinking about your sourcing, your searching capabilities, and if there are gaps in there, we'd love to speak to you. Okay, time for questions. I think we are on the half an hour, so we'll make this quick. And if we don't get to answer them, we'll get back to you. So, Dave, what have we got?
Yes, we have a couple of questions coming through. A question here from Scott. I'll paraphrase it. The question is, how does the search determine what level of proficiency or years of experience a candidate has with a skill or language, as this can be difficult to ascertain from a resume? Yeah, really good question. And effectively, it is also using how we parse this information. So it's using date ranges, it's using the context within the CV and the language around it as well. For example, if it's a a skill that's been used as part of a current work description with 10 years experience, that's going to influence how we score that term. If someone mentions a skill, if, for example, I studied French as a GCSE 20 years ago, well, we're reading that, and if there's no indication that you've used that or got more experience with that going through, then we'll probably say that that's a lower scored skill. So it's not always easy. It's not always going to be 100% perfect, but it's effectively like a human would, reading that CV and understanding the words around it. Another example of, if it was a job title, for example, someone that writes, I report to the project manager, is not the project manager necessarily. So again, it's using that, using the context, using date ranges, using the language within the CV to then score those terms. And that's sort of touching on some of what we'll go on to in a couple of weeks' time. But yes, that to answer that one. Aid, send one for you as well. So can you search over codes at the same time as typing in a natural language search?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as well as the DaXtra definitely helps build information off the CV, but of course, that information that recruiters qualify and update in the database as part of our implementation. We work very carefully with our clients to understand what are these key bits of information and how do you code, or how's the process of updating records in whatever CRM you're using. So the answer is absolutely yes. Be that static lists, be that salary, be that availability, be that industry. We help with industry as well. But again, all of that, that valuable structured information we help build, so you can have the best of both worlds, both pre and post search filters. And again, in the next part of the series, we'll be looking at how you can progress the candidate through or work with large sets of data, narrow that down, and then progress the candidate through the workflow. So make sure you join us in part 3, little plug there.
Cool. And just one last question here from Srini. It's, how does it work with years ranges? For example, if the candidate says they have 9 years project management experience and the job spec says they have 8 to 10 years. So, I mean, the way it would work is, yeah, you would read that off the job description yourself. You can type in the individual terms. So, for example, project management, and then you would set the range that you want. So you could set it between 8 to 10 years. If they therefore have 9 years project management experience, they will come back in your results. If they had 11 years or 7 years, then we would exclude them, because that's the range that you've set up. So it gives you full control over what you can, what the results are that are coming back.
Yeah, so if you just didn't want to have you could leave the top end empty, couldn't you? Just at least 8 years, and it's going to find you one over 8 years.
Correct. Exactly right.
Wicked.
Cool.
Is that us?
You, Aid.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Sorry, we're 4 minutes over. Hope that was informative. Thank you for attending. Great to see you here. We'll get back to anyone individually with any other questions, or please drop us an email. Please do join us for part 3. We're going to show you how DaXtra really starts to identify these records and helps recruiters identify the best candidates quickly and far more effectively, which is, of course, is going to be key. Thank you again. Our contact details here. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.
Thank you.